probably by the end of this week or early next week. Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. So today's Cascades, we're holding an additional tag meeting. We wanted to make sure that we provided information on our low carbon alternative fuels, as well as our plan for electrification modeling for this IRP. Before we presented final results at our fourth tag meeting that will happen on February 5th, I believe. And just a forewarning for everyone, I'm here at the office and they're expected to do fire alarm testing this morning at some point. They don't have an exact time. So just letting everyone know that those may go off, hopefully not during my portion of the presentation. But just wanted to let everyone know that those may turn on at some point. So just a quick agenda. We'll do introductions here in a little bit. We have a quick safety moment. Jenny DeVore is going to present on our low carbon alternative fuels. I'll do a presentation on the electrification modeling, and then we'll seek feedback. But just a reminder for everyone, feel free to provide feedback at any point during the presentation. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to come off mute and interrupt us and ask your questions. I am going to try and keep an eye on the chat and hands being raised. So please feel free to use those as resources for questions. And then, as always, there's plenty of time to give us. You can give us feedback after the presentation. So feel free to shoot us an email or give us a call and provide feedback that way. Then we'll discuss the remaining 2025 IRP timeline and next steps. Okay, we'll do introductions. I should have introduced myself at the very beginning, but I'm Brian Robertson, manager of supply resource planning with Cascade. And I'm just going to go down the list of people in the chat. And I'll call on you, and please introduce yourself, your title, and then the company or organization that you're representing. So, Jody.
Hi, I'm Jody. I'm an energy efficiency analyst at Cascade.
Thank you. Alessandra.
Hi, good morning. Alessandra de la Torre. I'm with the Northwest Energy Coalition.
Thank you. Bruce.
Good morning, Bruce Folsom. I'm a consultant to Cascade Natural Gas on their IRP.
Thanks, Bruce. Carrie.
Good morning. Carrie Buren, Program Delivery for Cascade Energy Efficiency.
Thank you. Kathleen.
Good morning. I'm Kathleen Campbell. I'm a senior engineer in engineering services for Montana Dakota's Utilities Group.
Thank you. Patrick.
Good morning, Pat Darris, Vice President of Engineering and Operations Services for Cascade Natural Gas.
All right, thank you. Jenny.
Good morning. Jenny DeBoer, Resource Planning Economist on Brian's team for Cascade.
Thank you. Ryan.
Ryan Denton, Resource Planning Economist on the Supply Resource Planning team.
Thank you. Jeff.
Hello, I'm an environmental economist on the IRP team at Northwest Natural.
Thank you. Vahilia.
Good morning. Vigilia Klima, a Environmental Compliance and Sustainability Manager, MDU.
Thank you. Megan.
Hi, good morning. I'm Megan Kelzer. I am an environmental specialist for Montana Dakota Utilities.
Thank you. Abby.
Abby Krebsbach, Environmental Director with Cascade Natural Gas MDU.
Thank you. Michael Myers.
Mike Myers, economist on Northwest Natural's IRP team.
Great, thank you. Brenda.
Hi everyone, business development, decarbonization in Northwest.
Thank you. Darcy.
Darcy Nigam, Vice President of Energy Supply for Cascade and Montana Dakota Utilities.
Thank you. Mike Parvinen.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Mike Parvinen. I'm with Cascade's regulatory team.
Thank you. Patrick Hanks. Patrick, I see you came off mute, but we're not hearing anything.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Awesome. Yes, this is Patrick Hanks with the Building Industry Association of Washington. Thank you.
Perfect. Alondra?
Good morning. This is Alondra with the Oregon Public Utilities Commission. I'm a senior utility analyst.
Thank you. Caleb?
Hey, good morning. Caleb Brammer. I'm a program manager for Cascade's energy efficiency team.
Great. Chris?
Good morning. I'm Chris Robbins, Director of Gas Supply for Cascade.
Perfect. Mark?
Good morning. Mark Sellers Vaughn, Upstream Resources Special Projects Manager for Cascade.
Great, thank you. Eric?
Yeah, good morning. Eric Wood, Gas Supply Manager for Cascade.
Sorry, Eric Sherman. I mean,
Sorry, Brian.
That's right.
You're
Senior
okay.
utility analyst, Oregon PSC staff.
Thank you. Zach?
Morning. Yeah, Zach Sowards with the engineering services out of MDU Resources.
Thank you. Matt?
Matt Steele with Oregon DEQ.
Great, thank you. Bailey?
Good morning, I'm Bailey Steves. I'm a resource planning economist with Cascade.
Thank you. Carolyn?
Carolyn Stone, gas supply analyst at Cascade.
Great, thank you. Quinn?
Quinn Weber, regulatory analyst, Washington ETC.
Thank you. And Will?
Good morning, Will Gerke, he, him, with NWEC.
And then I think I see Kara, you hopped on. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, sorry for being late. Good morning, everyone. Kara Saylor, Director and Staff Attorney at Green Energy Institute at Lewis and Clark Law School.
Great, thank you. And quickly skimming the list of people, I don't see anyone else who had jumped on. If there is, please feel free to jump in and introduce yourself.
Hey, good morning. Sorry I'm late, everyone. Devin McReal, Renewable Resources Manager with Cascade.
Perfect. Thank you, Devin. Okay, I think we're good to keep going. I believe everyone can see my presentation, but if not, please let me know, and we'll try to get that squared away. I'll jump into the safety moment real quick. So just want to remind everyone to safeguard your hearing. Sound is everywhere and it can harm your hearing when it's too loud or you're exposed to it for too long of a period of time. Generally, when your hearing is gone, it's gone for good. The louder the sound, the faster your hearing can be damaged. So here's a little bit of a statistic. So around 40 million adults have noise-induced hearing loss. The good news is you can use these steps to reduce noise-induced hearing loss. So make sure you lower the volume, whether that's the radio or your hearing buds or the TV. Try to move away from the noise if you can't lower the volume. And then make sure you wear hearing protection based on the level of sound you're exposed to. So if you're doing lawn work or anything like that, working on vehicles, make sure you're wearing the appropriate hearing protection. All right. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Jenny, and Jenny will take us through the low carbon alternative fuels.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Brian. I'll talk a little bit about the study that we got from ICF. So part of it's the alternative fuel price inputs. We did have a couple of model restrictions. We don't anticipate using carbon capture in the near future. While ICF model costs look reasonable, conversations with the developers reveal that realistically, no projects are going to be available for implementation prior to 2030. Another restriction, Cascade is considering removing low carbon alternative fuels from the model that are lower than current market prices. You'll see in some slides to come that there are some low carbon alternative fuels buckets that have different prices, but the same volumes. And this is meant to reflect the difference in potential demand. So we're currently running Monte Carlos on different buckets to determine what the actual accurate demand would be, and then removing some of the pricing for the extremely low demand scenarios so that Plexos isn't inappropriately selecting all these low cost resources that we don't anticipate actually seeing in the market. And then some other price inputs. Capital costs include equipment, pipeline cost, and installation and owner costs. O&M fixed and variable costs, electricity rates and gas rates are included. Expected prices are broken down between Northwest and National Technical Potential through ICF. ICF Resources LLC ran this low carbon alternative fuel study. They're a business consulting service that provides technical, administrative, and project management support for public interest energy research program, geothermal resources development account program, and other energy related research and development activities. The pricing was used from this study, but we're also taking into consideration market prices that we see through conversations with low carbon alternative fuels brokers and developers. To reduce model inputs, Northwest and national prices were averaged, and generally these prices were pretty close. This was done in real 2024 dollars, and then for Plexus, we'll be converting it to nominal dollars. Prices consider IRA incentives where applicable. So for hydrogen, there's the 45V tax credit. For CCUs, RNG, and RTCs, we consider the investment tax credit or production tax credit until 2030. And all low carbon alternative fuels, except for carbon capture, will be evaluated as off-system, meaning they won't flow in Cascade's distribution system. At this time, Cascade doesn't anticipate any ramifications. However, these are determined to be peak day reliable resources in the future that would impact upstream transportation and distribution system modeling. So these are the unbundled green attribute cost categorized by RNG source. So you have food waste, wastewater, animal manure, and landfill gas. The costs are unbundled and treated separately because an RTC that's unbundled with the gas is generally cheaper than if you're just buying the RTC. So the key indicates that the different sides of each facility, as well as demand, so that's kind of what we were talking about earlier. So you see like FW1, FW2, FW3, standing for food waste facility 1, 2, and 3. That has to do with facility size. You see as a facility gets larger, it's lower cost. Later on in the volumes, you'll see that although some of these facilities have different costs, they have the same volumes, and then that plays into what we were talking about earlier about the demand curve, kind of giving us different options of where they think demand will be. So we're running some Monte Carlos on those to see what an accurate demand would really be, so we can take out some of those cheaper ones that aren't going to be reflective of the current market. Currently, landfill gas and wastewater gas are the most financially feasible. Next, please. Again, we see that unbundled green attribute cost categorized by source and by facility. size slash demand size. Wastewater and landfill gas are again the most feasible. The model will likely select volumes from those two sources, and this is not dissimilar from what we see in the current market. Sources like animal manure and food waste have a higher carbon mitigation potential per decatherm, but as our current market treats compliance, it doesn't make financial sense. We are keeping an eye out for the change in the future markets if they were to account for energy intensity or to combine with the California and Quebec markets. So it's just something that we're keeping an eye on. Next, please. Carbon capture and synthetic methane. Carbon capture is graphed by mitigation intensity. As you can see, it's expensive. And we've talked with developers, and we don't think it's going to be feasible prior to 2030. Then synthetic methane, for those of you unfamiliar, unlike RNG, where methane's a byproduct purified enough to put on a gas system, synthetic methane, it's created by captured carbon dioxide molecule and then 4 hydrogen molecules, and synthetically making methane that way. And you can see here it's graphed by source, and that the most feasible would be large biomass facilities and solar green hydrogen. We'll press on to hydrogen prices. Again, you see hydrogen's graphed by source here. Currently, the most feasible is blue hydrogen and solar green hydrogen. And while it looks inexpensive, LDC still need to be doing some testing on how hydrogen would be implemented on systems online. So whether that be blending or dedicated pipelines to industrial customers with compatible machinery. But we're currently looking at off-system hydrogen RTCs as well. So that keeps it relevant in the short term. Previous slide submitted incorrectly showed $0 price. So it looked like it jumped, but we wanted to point out that that was just incorrectly put in. So you see now that turquoise hydrogen just isn't available until 2030.
I just wanted to hop in real quick and ask if there are any questions. We're kind of moving through these slides rather quickly, so just wanted to slow it down a little bit to see if anyone had questions. Feel free to put your hand up or put questions in the chat. If anything pops up while we're going through the volumes, feel free to send those over to us.
All right, these expected volumes, excuse me, are categorized into Northwest technical potential and national technical potential. This means ICF determined the amount of projects to be available to the LDCs in Washington and Oregon, and then Cascade was given an allocated percent of that LDC number, 13%. So the Northwest portion is the percent allocation that's available to Cascade out of all the projects available to the Northwest LDCs. And then national is the percent allocation that's available to Cascade out of all the projects in the rest of the US that are available to the Washington and Oregon LDCs. It can be a little confusing, so just clarifying there a little bit. But Cascade is slotted to receive 13% of that Northwest and that national share. Not all states are anticipated to enact similar climate policies as there are here in the Northwest. So ICF weighted the volumes for states where some form of climate policy is in place or is anticipated to be put in place. And this 13% allocation is based on the number of meters in Washington and Oregon in 2023. So you can see in that chart down there that Cascade had 13.23% of the meter numbers. So that's where we're getting that 13% from. We're not anticipating seeing a big fluctuation in that 13%. So that's probably going to stay about the same. Next, please. There are no questions. All right, renewable natural gas volumes, again, kind of categorized by source, and the key shows the facility size slash kind of demand. So you see These are a little bit different than the price graphs because some of the volumes, again, were the same. So for example, if you see landfill gas 1, landfill gas 3, landfill gas 2 is the same demand, same volumes as landfill gas 1. So that was omitted from the graph. But that's one of those cases where we'll need to evaluate what we think the demand's going to be and remove anything that's going to be anticipating demand being so low that costs are prohibitively low, basically. The largest volumes available are going to be in landfill gas. That's what we're seeing. Next. And then RTC volumes, again, categorized by source, given provided by facility size and emitting different facilities with the same volumes. Similarly, we're seeing that the largest volumes available are going to be in landfill gas and animal manure. And then
Yeah,
carbon.
Sorry, I see we have a question from Quinn.
Hi, Jenny. Could you go back to, oh wait, no, you're on the right graph. So are these projects scaled to Cascade's 13%?
Brian, I don't.
Yeah, that's correct. These volumes are scaled to Cascade's 13%.
So is there going to be enough within that 13% to fully decarbonize the system with just using RNG or RTCs?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Currently what we're doing is we're running these models in the resource integration section. So we don't have final results. I anticipate that these volumes will be enough to fully decarbonize. It's just depending on the cost. Yeah, I do think the volumes are high enough.
That's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, carbon capture and synthetic methane volumes. Again, carbon capture graphed by mitigation intensity. You see the volumes for carbon capture pretty flat. And again, we're not in consideration by Cascade for carbon capture prior to 2030. And synthetic methane graphed by source. The largest volumes available are in solar green hydrogen and wind green hydrogen. Now, I think I saw a question in the chat.
Yes. Okay, so yeah, I see Kara asked, are you expecting that RTCs will be available regionally? If not, in which states do you expect the RTCs to come from? So the ICF study doesn't necessarily break down where the RTCs come from. I don't know if Devin, if you could speak a little bit on what you're currently seeing in the market for location.
Yeah, I can weigh in on that. It's been fairly geographically diverse. I would say there's definitely a decent number here in the Pacific Northwest. Besides that, you see a lot in the Midwest. Iowa, Kansas are a couple of locations that kind of pop out at me, but mostly the projects I've been seeing are here in the Pacific Northwest and the Midwest, not too much on the East Coast.
Thanks, Devin. Thanks, Kara. And then I see Will, you have your hand up.
Hi, yes, Will Gerke with Northwest Energy Coalition. For synthetic methane, for the green, pink hydrogen, is that off system resources? Are you assuming like a book and claim approach on that, or off on system synthetic methane potential volumes? Just trying to understand.
No, that's a good question. As of right now, we're looking more off system book and claim. But it's definitely something that we're definitely looking at for on system, just not anything in the near term enough to model on system in the IRP.
Thank you.
Yep. Take it back over to you, Jenny.
All right, I think we're on the slide, about to move to slide 15. Here we have our expected hydrogen volumes by source. You see the largest volumes available in blue hydrogen and solar green hydrogen. Again, hydrogen is something that we're keeping an eye on, looking currently at RTCs, and then possibly in the future, some different on-system availability. But that's what I had. I toss it back over to you, Brian, unless there are any other questions.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to pop in. I know that these slides they were very heavily chart informed when we sent them out. We got some good feedback about providing some additional bullet points where there's just charts. So we've added those. Understandably, there may not be a lot of questions prior to this meeting. So if anything pops up based on what we've discussed and what you've seen additionally from now, since we originally provided these slides, feel free to reach out and send us those questions. Kara, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. I just was blue hydrogen. I just wanted to make sure since different entities use different interpretations of that, that's just methane based, but with carbon capture. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, Brian, that's my understanding of how we're going to be recording it is methane with carbon capture.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, and I should also add, I believe we have information for pink hydrogen, but we're not actually modeling pink hydrogen just because it's very nascent still, and there's not a lot of information on the peak hydrogen. But we wanted to try to get at least an initial projection from ICF on pink hydrogen.
That's great. And then I guess one follow-up question, since all of these volumes are based on an ICF study, is that something that will be provided? Or maybe you already have?
Yes. We're still finalizing it. It will be provided as an appendix to our IRP, but we will provide that study. But yeah, it's still currently being finalized, so we don't have anything to share yet. But we will once we get that finalized and wrapped up. Okay, so I'm going to jump into electrification modeling. I just want to first just put out there that this is the first time Cascade has done electrification modeling. You may notice some similarities. So Avista does this is calculation. This process originated with Avista. We liked that the way that they had modeled electrification. So we've kind of taken that model, some ideas from that model, and made some changes to it, our own little flair to it, just to test different things. So plan on presenting that today. So you may see some similarities. I'm happy to take any feedback. I'm not an expert on electrification. I don't claim to be an expert on electrification. We've done a lot of research on a lot of this stuff, and there's a lot of uncertainty around it. So please feel free to give feedback, ask questions. I'll answer as much as I can. So key inputs, we took a look at heat pump performance specs at varying temperatures. We took in, so the inputs would be the size and efficiency of a home. So you could run this model for different sizes of homes, different efficiencies of homes. You need to take into consideration the climate zone. So we'll discuss that a little bit further on. Take into consideration natural gas equipment efficiency. I believe for this model, we have plugged in 80% efficient natural gas in terms of heating. Now you could bump that up to the standards that are required of, I can't remember if it's 95 or 97%. Yeah, I see your question, Karen. I'll try to answer those as I go through this. And then gas and electric rates, those are key inputs, and then install costs with IRA rebates and incentives. So heat pumps, so talk a little bit about heat pumps. If you do some research on heat pumps, you'll see that there are several hundred types of air source heat pumps that you could model in this. And what we tried to do is we tried to keep it consistent with what Avista was modeling. So we utilized the same the heat pump that they included in their model. That way we can see the similarities between our model and their model. So we have to reduce this down. It's as much as I'd love to plug in hundreds and thousands of heat pumps, it would be very time consuming and probably a little bit out of the scope of an IRP. Just talk a little bit about these, and we'll see on the next graph. So these are the performance specs that you see on these different types of equipment, and you'll see what the input kilowatt is and then what the output max BTU per hour is. And so at 95 degrees Fahrenheit, for example, input kilowatt of 5.87 would output a max BTU per hour of 48,000. You can see as you're closer to a comfortable temperature that efficiency is much higher. Once you get down to colder temperatures, that efficiency it lowers. So you can see there at negative 22 degrees, the coefficient of performance is 137%. Whoops, I didn't need to jump to the next slide. So one thing, these are also modeled at the max capacity. I tried to do a little bit of research to understand where heat pumps actually operate, and my understanding is that they can get to about 75% of rated capacity when they get down to these lower temperatures. So it may be even a little less efficient than these numbers, but we wanted to be conservative with our calculations. So we've just plugged in the max rated capacities. So here, this is the heat pump efficiency measures. It measures the amount of output produced given the amount of input received at different temperatures. So again, as you can see, the closer you are to a comfortable temperature, the more efficient the heat pump is. And as it gets colder, so the lower temperatures, the coefficient of performance, it drops a little bit. And then at a certain point, when you're doing heat pump heating, you'll hit a point where you'll need to use auxiliary heat. So you can see in this model, it calculates the current heat pump efficiency and then the B2 per hour needed to heat up a room or the entire house or anything like that. So this, for purpose of this model, we used I think it was a 2,000 square foot home. And it requires, I think it was 50 B2 per square foot per HED. And so as you can see, as HEDs increase, the B2 need increases. And so you'll see that as the colder it gets, the heat pump can only do so much, and then you need auxiliary heat. So the coefficient of performance measures the ratio of useful heat or cooling provided to the energy required to produce heating or cooling. And then this is broken out by heat pump only coefficient of performance and heat pump and auxiliary heat combined coefficient of performance. So you can see at that point where the auxiliary heat is turned on, that coefficient of performance, you would jump to that combined coefficient of performance value. And so you could see that it actually decreases. It's lower than the just the heat pump itself. And then the heating cost per hour. So this would measure the cost to operate the heating system for electric versus gas at varying HED levels. So what we've done for this calculation is we went through and pulled the electric rates, the current electric rates for the shared electric customers that we have. Now, we've only used the base residential rate. Some of these have additional rates on them for colder temperatures. So these numbers may be a little bit low on the electric side when you get to these higher temperatures. I'm not an expert on all these. We share service territory with investor-owned utilities, municipalities, cooperatives. All of them have different rate structures, so it's very difficult to model this at an aggregate level of what we're doing as the pipeline zone, and combining all these different rates together. So we've just taken the residential rate average cost for what we're putting in as the electric rate. In terms of cost increase, ideally what we would have is we would have the IOUs and the cooperatives and municipalities provide rate increases. However, I don't think that information is readily available. We've reached out to a few cooperatives and municipalities. I've been in touch with a few. I've been told that they don't have the information at the moment. So yeah, I've tried to get the information. I don't think it's ready, or it's currently ready to get. So we're gonna have to plug in our best guess at what a rate increase looks like on the electric side. For this purpose of this model, it's only 3%. So just so that's known for everyone. So calculation of B2, so I mentioned this earlier. Yeah, what are the units? Good question. Yeah, dollar per MMBTU. That is correct. I think. I'll have to go back and confirm. I'll confirm that, and then I'll get back to you on that. Total square footage multiplied by climate zone, B2 per square foot value. That's how we calculate the number of BTUs needed for this. So as you can see, actually, I'll go to the next slide and then I'll pop back. So just a reminder of Cascade service territory. Cascade serves these yellow areas. So the very Pacific Northwest of Washington, in the Bellingham area, the Bremerton area, the Longview area, those would fall under 5C, or no, sorry, 4C for mixed marine. And then the remainder of our service territory, so Central Washington, Central South Washington, Northern Oregon. We also serve Central and Eastern Oregon. Those all would fall, apologies for bouncing around. Those would all fall under the 5B. They have slightly different values. So I believe the 4C is 45. And the 5B was 50. Yeah, Quinn, I see you have a question.
Total square footage, are you talking of the service territory?
No, so like for the building of the home, so
Okay.
you would need like 50 BTU per square foot. So if it's 2,000 square foot times 50, it's, I'm not going to do that math on the top of my head.
No worries, no worries. I got it now. Thank
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So that's how those are calculated, to calculate the need for the heating need for that room or the home. So if you were just doing a singular room, you could calculate the square foot of that room. So yeah, so as I mentioned on the last slide, we serve up here in the Bellingham area, the Bremerton area, and the Central South Washington area. And you can see how this crosses over multiple different investor-owned utilities, municipalities, cooperatives, PUDs. We do share service territory with 25 across both Washington and Oregon, based on our calculation. We've done our best to pull those rates, and we've averaged those rates by our customer class. So if we have most of our customer class in the Bellingham area, it may be an IOU that is heavily weighted towards those rates. And then we've done this by the different pipeline zones. We have 10 pipeline zones, as a reminder, 7 in Washington, 3 in Oregon. Are there any other questions before I continue on? I didn't anticipate this meeting going the entire 3 hours, so if you have any questions, feel free to ask. There's plenty of time for conversation. So install costs, these came from the American Council for Energy Efficient Economy report. I've put it here. They also go by ACEE, or ACEEE, I think. What I did is they have the cost for putting in heat pumps. They have the cost for if you need to do electric wiring upgrades or panel upgrades, they include those costs. So this is an electrification report that they had provided these costs. I will say I don't know. I tried to do a little bit of research. The costs seem a little bit low to me. I haven't adjusted these numbers at all in the model. I just wanted to add that that narrative around that. I've talked to people regionally and their projects and other projects I've heard of are a little more expensive in this area. So I just wanted to make note of that. We do model this, so you'll see in the graphs that we model this in 3 separate income groups for the electric side. That's below 80% medium household income, between 80 and 150% medium household income, and above 150% medium household income. The reason for this is the HERA and the tax incentives are broken out by that. Actually, I think it's mainly the HERA. As you'll see on the next slide, we wanted to take a look at this with an equity lens and try to focus and see what the cost would look like for a lower income versus low to moderate and then a higher income. So this third bullet point, it doesn't really affect the calculation much. It's more of a talking point. I just wanted to share that assuming a log normal distribution, a standard deviation of 1, we would anticipate 41.3% falling under that first threshold of below 80%, 24.6% falling between 80 and 150%, and then 34% above 150%. And so the reason why I bring this up is, so Washington State, for these energy programs, they were awarded, I believe, $165 million for the IRA for energy projects, such as electrification. If we were to assume, let's assume like a $5,000 project. Oh, the fire alarms are going off. Hopefully that doesn't bug anyone. So if we assume the $165 million spread out over the 7 years of the IRA, you're looking at $23.5 million. And if we assume a $5,000 per project cost of the IRA money going towards those projects, you're looking at approximately like 4,700 buildings per year of utilizing this money for these projects. If you take in consideration Cascade service territory compared to, so the number of buildings we serve compared to the entirety of Washington State, we would probably look at about 300 buildings utilizing this IRA money per year. So that's the reason why I wanted to point that out. I see, Quinn, you have a question?
Yeah, Brian, I think this is really good analysis. I'm wondering if you'll be doing something similar for electrification projects associated with Climate Commitment Act funds.
So can you expand on that a little bit, I guess?
Like there will be.
I don't think I have that included, but I'm curious. I wasn't familiar with the funds that were going towards electrification. So I think if you could,
I can send you some more information in a follow-up.
yes,
Yes,
that would be helpful. And I can include that. The idea is just to try to get an idea of the number of customers that would be financially supported for these projects, to help us understand the idea around how many dollars would be flowing to projects like this, making it more cost effective for customers to do these projects. So that would be helpful. So yeah, and the last bullet point, install costs are broken out by space heat, water heat, and others. And then install costs also have a payback period, assuming a loan. I don't remember exactly what was in the model when I made the graphs for this. I would assume the payback period would probably be 5 to 10 years, depending on how much you're willing to pay per month. And then the loan, the interest rate would probably be, I would assume, close to 10%. But you may be able to get something better. I'm still trying to do more research on those numbers. But if anyone has any information on that would be great as well. So here's a little bit of a breakdown on the IRA. So like I had mentioned, the low and moderate incomes. So you can get up to $14,000 total for multiple projects. So this isn't just for a singular project, but it could cover up to $14,000. And so like I'd mentioned, the low income, so the below 80% would be 100% of project costs, and then the moderate income household would get 50%. And then I think the above 150%, they were only able to get the IRA tax incentive, which is up to 30% of project costs. And I want to say that was capped at $2,000 for heat pumps. So with all that said, so what we did is we ran this model. As you can see here, these are the annual costs that a customer would pay, including installation costs and costs of service. So you can see here in the first 5 years, this is assuming a 5-year payback period. The lower income would get more of that IRA incentive, so they would get much of that project paid for. So they would have a very low payback for the first 5 years. The low to moderate income, so the moderate income levels would have a lower, but not as low as the low income, and then the higher income that would only receive the tax incentive is the gray line. And then this is compared to the gas. So if you continued with your gas service and didn't replace the gas service, so that was just the cost of service. And I want to say this is the average cost by month. Yeah, it's a little confusing. This actually should be monthly cost per year. So I'll try to clean that up for the final version of the presentation that gets posted out on the website. And then what we do is we levelize this cost. So we say, what does this cost over 15 years? That way it takes out that big jump here. So you can see that the cost of service is actually below what the gas is. But when you include the cost of the actual project, it makes it go a little bit higher. So these are levelized costs over 15 years, including installation costs and cost of service. Again, including different install costs based on IRA incentives. And the reason for this big jump here is that we assume after 2032 that you're no longer able to access those IRA dollars because the IRA is set to expire in 2032. Again, it includes costs to electrify versus remaining as a gas customer. And then, projects done after 2031 do not include IRA incentives. So this right here is an example. And again, these are not final results. I wanted to make that clear. These are preliminary results. There's still some tweaking that needs to be done to the model and some final touches. Yeah, I see, Eric, you have a question?
Yes, although I don't necessarily want to interrupt you, but
No,
This
go
would be a
ahead.
good time, since you mentioned expiration of the IRA, perhaps the importance for, in the case of the state of Washington, those Climate Commitment Act funds, and of course for our equivalent of that in Oregon would be the electrification measures that would be funded from the CCIs here, would be the possibility that the IRA is about to expire in a couple weeks, or maybe new expenditures will be suspended by some investigation that's followed by a reconciliation budget bill that turns that into tax-free tips or something like that, right? So I think that having a state funding understanding of where the electrification could be subsidized at the state level will be important for the possibility that the IRA is going to go away soon.
Yeah, no, that's good feedback, and I'd be happy to include state funded dollars. I haven't I don't have any information on state funded dollars yet. I don't think there's any information on how CCIs will fund electrification yet. If there is information, please let me know. I'm happy to include those in this model.
I also have a clarifying question about this analysis. Is this for load forecasting, or is this for the program participant portion of a total resource cost test for an electrification measure?
So what I do is I take a singular residential customer in Cascade service territory, and I try to calculate as best as possible the cost how much it would cost them to electrify their home. And I compare it to the gas rates.
Thank you. And so when I say, is this for the purpose of load forecasting, when this information, is this essentially a more empirical in place replacement of what were relatively arbitrary but very helpful levels of sensitivity for electrification that you had before? Is that what we're doing here?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we're kind of looking at it two different ways, right? So the idea of the IRP is to look at ways to serve your customers cost effectively, right? And so if it's cost effective to electrify those customers, maybe we move in that direction. But so there's kind of two schools of thought on it, but there's also trying to use this information to understand consumer behavior and what they may do on their own. So I would kind of answer that question in two different ways. So yeah, looking at it in terms of serving our customers, as well as looking at it and determining, like you had mentioned, impacts to load forecast and how consumers may behave in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so Kara asked, how do you assess the cost of remaining as a gas customer? Yeah, so what we will be doing is on our end, we have our Plexos model, and what it does is it tells us here's what it's gonna here's how much RTCs you need, or RNG, or hydrogen, or whatever the low carbon alternative fuel is to meet the load. And we're going to do bill impact analysis on it and try to calculate bill impacts. I think we'll get some good information for near term. Obviously, the further out you get, the more uncertain it is. But that's how we're going to be using that data to calculate our gas rate increases. Yeah, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate that. So I guess maybe two follow-ups. Does it include equipment replacements? Like I guess maybe this is just, sorry, I maybe missed what the cost includes. The cost here, it does include equipment for the electric side, right?
So this, are you talking about the electric rates or the equipment for the customer?
Okay, so right here you have the levelized cost. It includes the install cost for the IRA incentive on this slide, right? So
Yeah.
does the gas cost also include the cost of replacing your furnace, right, at the 15-year mark or whatever?
It does not in these slides. The model, I have put in the model the option to do that. Again, there's two schools of thought here of, right, like looking at this as serving our customers. If we were to go out and do this project, we would be charged with paying for that electric, that heat pump. The way that we're looking at it, we wouldn't have to pay for putting in a gas furnace, right? And so if you're looking at it as like a utility cost test, what it would cost the utility to electrify a home, that's what we tried to gather with this, is what those costs would look like. Now, if we're trying to look at it like customer behavior or consumer behavior, yeah, you may want to try to think about what it would look like on a marginal basis between, like at the time that their gas furnace needs to be replaced, they do a cost effective analysis and they take that marginal cost for the heat pump. So currently the way that these slides are showing, it does not include that marginal cost, but the model itself, I've put in there that it could, if you just have to flip a switch and it will turn it on.
Okay. Okay. I might have more questions about that just as I sort of, ruminate a little bit on it. And then I guess the other question I have, and this is going to be hard to do, but I just wonder if you're thinking about it. The cost of to remaining customers of attrition. So if you're losing customers over the course of time, how does that impact the cost to the customer? Again, hard to, of course, capture, but I think something maybe good to think about in some fashion.
No, that's a good question. We are going to attempt to do that. Like you mentioned, it is hard. But we do have our low growth scenario where it's actually declining in customer count. So what we'll do is we'll have our low, in our low growth customer count scenario, we're going to have bill impact for that. And if you recall from our last IRP, you saw those rates were pretty exponential. So yeah, that's what we're attempting to do in the low growth scenario. Byron, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, thank you. So I guess Byron Harmon from the UTC here. So I want to make sure I'm understanding this graph because I kind of jumped in the conversation a bit late. So the graph here is showing the kind of amortized cost of heat pump installation and electric service over time. Is that right? Like you're kind of like taking those installation costs and then like averaging out. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Going back to slide 20, I noticed that there's a fairly like consistent gap between like the heat cost per hour. Up until about, I think that's like 16 degrees or so when the blue and the orange line intersect. So when we're comparing the costs here, like, does that also include like the levelized cost of like furnace replacement and stuff too? And also like the cost of like that difference in like cost and gas service for heating? Like, I guess like when we're doing this comparison, how are we comparing the costs of gas service? Are we doing like a consistent, like if I'm on the gas service, this is how much I'm paying for space heating. this is how much I'm paying, every, 12 to 20 years to replace my furnace. And then like levelizing that out and then comparing that to levelized cost of um, electrification. Like, is that what we're comparing here?
So on this slide, this is the heat cost per hour for just the service, not
Right.
for install. Yes, so what it does is it essentially takes this slide here. What it does is it takes this and levelizes over 15 years. So I guess so I should actually clarify this right here. This graph is if you did this project in 2025. This graph here is 2025 levelized over 15 years. So that would be the cost 2025 out to 2039 levelized. If a person did the project in 2025, it takes those 15 years of costs and levelizes it, and then that's what it is in 2025. 2026, this is if the project started in 2026. And this is the cost for install for 5 years, payback for 5 years, plus the service for the full 15 years.
Okay. And so if I'm reading this right, looking at the gas residential and gas low income lines, so the light blue and the light and the yellow, you're saying that adding up all of the price savings from the slide on page 20 doesn't even cause it to intersect here, is what you're saying. Like even with all of those cost savings from the heat pump from slide 20, it doesn't even get close. Well, I guess it does get kind of close here, but it doesn't even cross that threshold of being cost competitive. Is that what this graph is trying to communicate?
Yeah. So that's correct. I will mention that Zone 30W is one of our higher costs. So if I went to this here, you'll see that it's actually pretty close for the low income. And this is Zone 20 where we have some of our lower electric costs. So it's a little bit closer here. And then I have a final slide that I'll talk a little bit. So this, but I don't want to go beyond your question. But also yes. So going back to what Kara said, this is the install cost for electric, not the marginal cost. So if you were to consider maybe consumer behavior when their gas service is up, I would suspect if you use a marginal cost that the two low income ones would drop below the the gas service.
Yeah. Is this also for the gas side? Is this also including like CCA compliance costs and stuff like that too?
So yeah, that's the goal. We like I mentioned, we have not finalized those values yet. So right now for these slides, these are just plugged in numbers. That's why this is preliminary results. These may change. But yes, the intent is that it will include the increased cost from carbon compliance.
Okay. Yeah.
And again, I also want to mention that we don't have great numbers for the electric service yet. Right? So like if you think about what the electric is going through, right, with the AI demand centers and the growth from that, plus the growth from electrifying the transportation and electrifying new construction buildings, we can anticipate that their rate increases are probably going to go up as well, especially when they're trying to meet carbon goals. So yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty here. That's one thing that I wanted to point out that These numbers, we've put them together as best as possible, but there is a lot of uncertainty to consider with these and risk.
Yeah, I just also want to note, I appreciate your team taking the effort to at least make an approximation and start developing methodologies around this. I think that you're right, there's a lot of uncertainties. I think this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and I want to say I appreciate the effort your team has put into it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we are settling on a final result now and just sticking with it. I think this will be an ongoing discussion, and hopefully, yeah, we can do more, maybe some pilot programs to gather more data and things like that. So yeah, this is just a starting point, and we're trying to calculate this as best as possible. There's one last point I wanted to make, or I wanted to show. So a lot of this modeling is done, and this goes back to the whole uncertainty thing. A lot of this modeling is done, and we model it with normal weather. We do a lot of our modeling with normal weather. We have some peak events, but I wanted to test this and see, because if you go back to slide 20, right? So normal weather probably falls in this 28 to 31 HED range. So you'd see that the auxiliary heat, when you model this under normal weather, is probably not hit very often. So what I did is I went back and used the previous 12 years of weather data. That way we kept the same cycle with like leap years, just for simplicity's sake. And I plugged in actual HEDs and ran this model, and you can see that there's quite a bit of an increase in the cost on the electric side and the gas side too. Oops, sorry. But you can actually, I think the gas stayed the same. I'll have to take a look at that, but you can see how there's an increase on the electric side, in terms of cost. So I just wanted to note that that looking at this with normals may throw off a few things. Trying to take a look at actual usage fluctuation when modeling electrification, it may point out a few things that normal weather wouldn't. Okay. Yeah, Byron, go ahead.
Yeah. I guess this is more just kind of like a note. It sounds like there's a lot of assumptions going into like this kind of model around like how we're looking at costs, like comparative costs. For the sake of the IRP, it might be useful to kind of like spell out those assumptions and stuff, so that way folks can kind of interact and like comment and engage with those and really kind of understand what it is that you're trying to do with this. I think that'd be really productive and helpful.
Yeah, no, definitely. That is my intent for the IRP narrative, to try to spell out all those assumptions and some of the uncertainties around all these assumptions and risks. And then, yeah, what we'll do is, once we have, like I said, I need to clean up some of the calculations in here and make sure that things are tied correctly to one table to the next. But once we get all that finalized, we'll definitely post it out on our website so people can go in and you can plug in, you can change what the heat pump is and what the size of the home is, and you can rerun the calculation, the location of it. So yeah, that's the intent. Hopefully that information will be out there for everyone to see and to understand. I see an additional question from Patrick. What causes the big jump for electric costs? So this isn't what this is it's the IRA is set to expire in 2031. And so there's no so like if you were to make a decision to electrify in 2032, there's no IRA HERA dollars or tax incentive dollars to help offset those costs for the low income and the moderate income. So it's not a jump in costs. It's a no, I guess it is a jump in cost, but it's the cost where if that customer made that decision in 2032, they wouldn't have access to that IRA money. Okay, so yeah, like I mentioned, I didn't anticipate this going the full 3 hours. There's plenty of time for more conversation. If anyone has any more questions, please feel free to jump in. If you have any questions after this, you can email us at irp@cngc.com. I put it in the chat. So you can send over more questions if you have them that pop up later. But I'll pause for a second, see if there's any questions. Yeah, Byron?
I won't wait till other people have other questions because I want to cede the floor to other people first because I have lots of questions.
Okay. Okay, I see Car's comment. Yep, no problem. Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions, Byron. So
Yeah. I guess I don't know if Quinn asked this earlier, but earlier in this presentation around like slide 12 and 13, there's these kind of volumes of RNG that's being discussed. And one question I have is, are those values including like the 13% stake that Cascade would have in regional RNG? Or are those like kind of like totals for the area for the region? Like
this would be Cascade's share.
And I guess the next question is like if we were to assume that Cascade were to get all of it, all of like that's the full 13%. What percentage of total demand could be met? Like, is full decarbonization possible?
So
like if you were to sum up all of these into like a stacked graph or whatever, would that be possible?
Yeah. So right now we're running the models. I'll ask you a follow-up question. Would you want to see that with no allowances? So if we remove the allowances, is that what you're asking? Like if we didn't participate in the Washington auctions, would this be enough? Is that
It's more of like we have these state emission goals. We have the CCA, which is supposed to align with those state emission goals. And the emission goals say that by 2050 or maybe 2045, we're supposed to be at 95% below 95% below our 1990 levels of emissions. And so like the question is like if Cascade were to meet or be in line with those state emission goals proportionately, like would it be possible to decarbonize? Like is that even from like an engineering standpoint or a like sheer volume of gas that might be available by 2045 or 2050 even possible?
Yeah. So like I mentioned, we are currently modeling that in Plexos, but I anticipate that the volumes would be high enough.
Really interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So I guess to go back to your question, was your question on RNG and RTCs only?
Not just RNG, but like the full gamut of
All the
options.
low
So like if
carbon
you guys are,
alternatives?
yeah,
Okay.
so if you guys are looking at hydrogen, synthetic methane, the whole gamut in terms of like, is it actually possible to meet demand while being in compliant with state emission goals? Like that's kind of the question is like if we're going to be looking out into that future.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll definitely go back and confirm. And obviously that will be answered when we file the final. And hopefully it's answered by February 5th when we have tag 4. But I believe the answer is yes, but we'll definitely confirm that.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys doing that additional analysis around the state emission goals. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, are there any other questions? Are there any other thoughts? Okay, I'll give everyone some time to think about questions as I click back through these. So just to do 2 more slides on the next steps. So reviews for plans for, it should be tag 4 discussion. We'll have a presentation on distribution system planning, final integration results, and then finalization of plan components, and we'll respond to any tag 3 feedback that we receive. And then we'll discuss a proposed new 2 to 4 year action plan. And just a reminder, so it is Wednesday, February 5th when we plan on holding our final tag meeting. I say final tag meeting, but we also have a tag 5 scheduled if needed. So if we're going to run our tag 4 meeting on February 5th, and then we'll produce a final draft. We'll ask for comments due by April 15th. And if based on those, if someone's like, hey, can you talk about this a little bit more? We'll try to focus tag 5 on any requests. So if you have any requests for tag 5 and want to hear more, please let us know, and we can hold a 5th tag meeting. And then we want to try to finalize by May 16th. That way we can have it filed by May 23rd. And I wanted to also put out a reminder. I meant to do this at the beginning too. We did file our first, I think it was chapters 2 through 7. If you have any feedback on those, please let us know by Friday. I know we've gotten some feedback so far. I appreciate that. Thank you. But if anyone else has any comments that they want to provide, please let us know by Friday. That way we can get those incorporated into the final draft. Okay, that's all we have today. I'll open it up for the final questions, any thoughts, any concerns, anything. If not, we'll let everyone go. I'll leave it open for about 10 seconds if nothing comes up. Okay. Not seeing anything, seeing people drop off, so I appreciate everyone being here. Let us know if you have any feedback, and then we'll see everybody for tag 4 on February 5th.
Thank you, Brian.